Portimao and Valencia to complete the 2025 MotoGP World Championship. Marc Marquez, though, could complete the comeback to beat all comebacks here this weekend in Japan, as he has his first opportunity to win his first MotoGP World Championship since 2019. It feels like we've been here before, doesn't it? 2014, 2016 and 2018. Marc Marquez, when he was then, of course, the talisman, the superstar for HRC, did clinch the MotoGP World Championship right here in front of the Japanese fans. Well, he could make it 4 title successes here in the Far East. As long as Marc outscores brother Alex by 3 points come close of play on Sunday afternoon, well, the title will be back in his hands. 7 MotoGP titles, 9 in total, of course, in an illustrious career. And it would, as mentioned, probably be the greatest comeback we've ever seen in motorcycle racing. One of the great comebacks in sporting history, as Marc Marquez stands on the brink of becoming just the 4th rider to win a MotoGP crown for Ducati. Casey Stoner, of course, won Ducati's first ever world title here back in 2007, right here in Japan. There is the mass. Well, it gets simpler and simpler the more we move on into the season, doesn't it? 3 points then is the golden number for Marc to win the World Championship here this weekend. Can Alex stop him? And he delay the celebration until next weekend over in Mandalika in Indonesia? Well, we'll find out. There's already been some good news for Alex in the build to this Japanese Grand Prix. More on that very, very shortly. FP1 then getting action underway here in round 17 coming up shortly. In the company, I'd like to say, of Matt Burton, Lewis will be in the commentary box. Jack Appleyard down in pit lane. Well, Lewis, this is a race weekend that Marc Marquez has been waiting 6 long years for. Up a weekend he probably thought at times was never ever going to come his way once again, but he is on the brink of world title success. It does look like it's going to happen very, very soon. He said not a disaster if it doesn't happen this weekend. You have to feel that Marc's in position A to get the job done here this weekend, once again in Japan.
And knowing Marc Marquez like we do, he's going to want to win the World Championship in Marc Marquez style by winning the Grand Prix. Remember the last World Championship he won, he was prepared to risk it all in the final corner to pass Fabio Quartararo and Buriram to win his most recent MotoGP World Championship. It does feel remarkable to say that that was now 6 years ago, but that wait now could be over in just 48 hours or so from now. Of course, a world champion himself in Moto2, Ayagura, also in action this weekend. Of course, so much home support for him over the years. They get to see Ayagura in MotoGP on Japanese tarmac for the very first time here. Relieved to say that too after Ayagura, given the high-speed nature of his exit from the San Marino Grand Prix.
Golden Eye, of course, it was Golden Eye about 12 months ago, wasn't it, when he clinched the Moto2 World Championship at the Chang International Circuit over in Buriram. Yes, scary, real scary incident which put Ayagura out of that Misano Grand Prix a couple of weeks ago. Caught up with him briefly before he was in the pre-event press conference yesterday. He said he lost to the front on that track out of Puri, going through turn 11 at 260 kilometres an hour. Data showed that he departed company with the RSGP still at 240 kilometres an hour. Clearly the fastest crash that Agurba-san has had in his Grand Prix career. He was unfortunately forced to miss the post-race test session at the Misano World Circuit. Marco Simoncelli on the Monday, we're happy to report. He said yesterday he's about 80-90% at full fitness. So a relief, I think, for all Japanese fans to see Agurba-san fighting fit and ready to go in his home Grand Prix.
You just saw Pedro Acosta a moment ago in the Red Bull KTM factory box. Of course, the highest and lowest points, I guess, of his rookie season in MotoGP came here last year when he took pole position and was on course to win the sprint ahead of this man, Pecco Bagnaia, before he crashed out of what was a pretty comfortable lead at this point. Acosta, I guess, with a score to settle with the ability to resolve Motegi here this weekend.
Hard to believe, isn't it? It's 1 year ago since this rider on your screens, the under pressure, under fire Pecco Bagnaia, completed double win here last year from the front row of the grid. Another miserable Misano experience last time out for the 28-year-old Italian. He's turned to the guidance, the expertise of Casey Stoner over the last couple of weeks or so. He's proven to be quite a valuable wingman, isn't he? The double world champion himself, of course, for Ducati and HRC. Bagnaia has spoken in glowing terms about the help that has come from the Australian, and boy does he need some external help right now, does Bagnaia. 5 rounds in a row without a podium for the first time since the opening 5 Grand Prix of 2022. Can Motegi offer some hope for the Italian?
And anything that Casey Stoner knows about MotoGP or doesn't know isn't worth knowing, quite frankly. And it was interesting to hear Pecco Bagnaia talking about Casey working on the bike during the back at Misano a couple of weeks ago. But in addition to that, it's just the advice that Casey Stoner can hand to Pecco about mentally how to cope with a kind of situation like this. Generally, we never saw Casey Stoner in this kind of problems. Whatever motorcycle you gave him, he would be super fast on it. It's up to Pecco now to produce the goods on a motorcycle that he is clearly far from comfortable on. So you do wonder whether that's one area in particular where Casey can provide some advice in terms of how to ride around problems.
Fabio Gian Antonio, who's been super sharp of late, hasn't he, on Sprint Saturdays, the Pertamina VR46 Enduro racing rider. 3 sprint podiums in the last 3 over in Hungary, Catalonia and most recently Misano, and finally finding some decent speed and form once again on Sunday, as he was long overdue a top result, wasn't he? And he got it, 5th place in front of his home crowd last time out in San Marino. Puts the pressure on the in-team battle in terms of the championship with himself and Frankie Morbidelli. Just a single point splitting them two coming into this round 17. So then it is all eyes on Marc Marquez as he looks to complete what has been an utterly dominant 2025. I think many of us thought that Marc was going to be in tandem with the factory Ducati, the package, the rider to beat in 2025, but the fact that he's been so dominant. 25 victories in 32 rounds or 32 events so far this year. Davide Tardozzi fans are out in the grandstands as well. Misano having held off the brilliant charge of Marco Bezzecchi, his 11th victory of the campaign, the 3rd time MotoGP. Marc has won 11 or more going back to 2014 and 2019. He has just been simply unstoppable throughout the whole campaign.
As mentioned earlier on, Pecco Bagnaia did the double here last year. Doing the double the year before that was Jorge Martin back in the rain-affected 2023 Japanese Grand Prix encounter. So we see a young Marc Marquez fan who's already managed to get her hands on a Marc Marquez replica, although it's not too dissimilar to the helmet that Marc Marquez wore at this Grand Prix a year ago. But returning to Martin, who of course we saw in the Aprilia box a moment ago, he actually finally got the opportunity yesterday to pose in the MotoGP group photo with our full complement of 22 regular full-time MotoGP riders down on track this weekend. Jorge Martin, of course, was absent from the official group photo back in Buriram. So the last Grand Prix, potentially, where he could call himself the current world champion, he got his opportunity to pose with the full field on board his #1 Aprilia.
Yeah, a full complement of our full-time riders here this weekend in Japan. A little bit of housekeeping to bring you. This will be no surprise whatsoever. Good news for Japanese fans. Very, very popular, of course, in this part of the world. We are welcoming back HRC test and development rider Taki Nakagami. He's back for another play on the RC213V development machine. So yeah, the 33-year-old Japanese rider is back in action. Let's hope it's a less painful experience than his last outing over in the Renault Grand Prix, where he missed the Sunday action, suffering a rather nasty knee injury in the sprint. So Marc Marquez then, about to kick off preparations for a weekend. His date with destiny in many respects. A weekend I think a few of us, even including Marc himself, would have doubted would ever come at his door after the career-threatening injuries over in Jerez back in 2020. Threw away, 3 or 4 years, didn't he, of his Grand Prix career. Really did start coming back to his best in 2024. He was given that lifeline by the Gresini Ducati team. Of course, said himself, he took a £20 million pay cut to quit Honda towards what, on the end of that 4-year contract. Never been about the money as far as Marc's concerned. It's just been about primarily enjoying himself and then winning as well. Vamos Marquez 93. It will be some story. I wonder what the emotions will be if Marc does get the championship done here this weekend. He said it's pretty much inevitable. Not a disaster if he doesn't get the job done here this weekend. Well, that's where we sit in terms of your championship. 182 point clear he is. Ali, just the 3 points required here this weekend. There'll be 37 available. We will be able to say Marc Marquez as a 2025 MotoGP World Champion. The only rider that can stop him is brother Alex, who's had a superb build-up with this. And we mentioned two of this Japanese Grand Prix. Really excellent news as far as Alex is concerned, being heavily rewarded for what's been a stunning 2025 campaign for himself. Confirmation from the captain. Alex will get a significant machine upgrade next year. He will be, along with Mark, Pecco Bagnaia and Fabio Di Gianantonio, on a full-spec factory GP26 next season. Richly deserved.
Absolutely, the form he's been on, the fact that he's beaten in the World Championship, well, it looks like he's going to beat the other two GP25 shod riders of Pecco Bagnaia and Fabio Gianantonio this season. He has earned the right to put himself on factory spec machinery in next season, although he did admit that it is going to change his pre-season somewhat from the build-up to 2025, where we were talking up his chances before the campaign began, because of course he'd been able to just pick up and plug in and play basically the motorcycle that won last year's World Championship, the GP24, without any development work to really carry out. He's going to have to carry out plenty of that in the run-up to next season, but that's I guess a good problem to have if you're Alex Marquez. It's the status, it's the kudos of being a factory supported rider of MotoGP with Ducati. And I spoke to him back in Hungary actually about the general World Championship situation. Of course, catching Marc Marquez looked a long shot from quite a long way into this season, but he did point out how much it would mean to him and to the family if they could end this season first and second in the MotoGP World Championship. That is, of course, another part to this Marquez success story in 2025. Of course, so much of the focus, quite rightly, on Marc Marquez as he closes in on the World Championship, but for the Marquez family to be first and second in the MotoGP World Championship, as good as it gets for them.
Yeah, great news as far as Gazini Racing and Alex are concerned. And looking towards the future, this is the HRC test garage. A very familiar face there, who's still working behind the scenes at Honda. Going to be keeping a close eye on Taka Nakagami's performance this weekend. Was Ken Gauchi, still with his trusted clipboard, of course, famous from back in the days when he was a figurehead of Suzuki's GSX-RR project. He might not be here in person. I think he's racing in Japan here this weekend at the Fuji circuit on 4 wheels, Valentino Rossi. But we still have an awful lot of support in this part of the world. That young lady enjoying her weekend so far. A little bit of divided loyalty, a 46 t-shirt and bright yellow ear defenders and a 93.
Not quite old enough to understand why that's so contentious.
Yes, well, it's going to be very soon, isn't it? I hate to dredge this up, but we can't really ignore it because we're coming up to the 10th anniversary, aren't we, at the Malaysian Grand Prix in Sepang, after a certain clash between 46 and 93 over in Malaysia. Let's go down and say good morning to Jack for the first time, and then say good morning to Jack for the first time on our fly away tour. A bit of a tech update. What's going on, Jack?
Yeah, good morning to everybody at home. I have to say, on a baking hot Friday morning here in Japan, even when we were walking to the cars this morning at 7:30, the sun already was searing down on us. Certainly going to be a test, these conditions, for everybody, but we do anticipate we could have a little bit of wet weather throughout the course of the weekend, which feels normal for a Japanese Grand Prix. And yeah, we saw Ken Kawauchi down in a Honda test garage. Quite interestingly, Taka Nakagami's machine is a bit different compared to the rest of the R2 on in particular the rear seat unit. It is completely redesigned, much sort of fatter in the middle, which gives you the impression that they have had to make to put something within that seat unit. Now, more often than not, that will be a mass damper that will go into that. So the fact that it's on both machines and it is radically redesigned as well, obviously Honda testing something of the deal with potentially a step forward for Taka Nakagami, which we've spoken a lot whilst on Honda. With the upgrade, and the real step that they've been able to make in the factory now. That the new swing arm, the carbon swing arm that they've been implemented, the new electronics, a lot was made of the new chassis. Will finally, at last, as we anticipated it would be after the Misano test, Johan Zarco in the LCR box has now got all of those updates on his bike. He's been crying out for them ever since the summer break, really. So great for Johan and the LCR squad that he's on a level playing field now with both Johan there and Luca Marini. And just finally, and for me, probably the most interestingly as well, for so often the exhaust system on the the Yamaha M1 has remained the same probably for more than a decade now. It has been just a classic design that has worked for them, but Miguel Oliveira, Jack Miller and Fabio Quartararo have a completely newly designed, quite radically different exhaust units on the rear of those M1s, which I think will come to a surprise to a lot of people, given the fact that we expect that this M1 in its current format with this inline 4 is pretty much going to die in 6 rounds time when they move across to the V4. So Yamaha, fair play to them and credit to them that despite only having 6 rounds left of the M1 in its current formation, they are still trying, and this new exhaust system is there on just one of the bikes for Jack and Miguel to try this morning. And just finally as well, long one, sorry to keep waffling on, a lot has been mentioned about Pecco Bagnaia. Well, some of the changes, Davide Tardozzi confirming, he's continuing on with them old front forks, which he had so much success with in previous years. He's also now reverting back to the 2024 swing arm as well. So those are just 2 of some of the changes that Pecco has made at the Misano test and has continued on here in Japan.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jack. Great spotting, as always, down in pit lane. While we were listening to the back end of Jack's interesting tech updates, it's been a real poor start for this Japanese Grand Prix for a couple of Aprilias. Raul Fernandez down hard. I think it was turn 7, wasn't it, that caught out Raul. There we go, a couple of barrel rolls through the gravel trap there for Fernandez. Turn 11 though, turn 10 on the graphic, turn 11 it was the downhill 90-degree corner, a real nasty front end washing out for Marco Bezzecchi. 5 podiums in the last 7 Grand Prix for Bez, but an early cage rattler for the Italian to kick off his Motegi experience.
Yeah, went down quite early, didn't he? He didn't get anywhere near to the heart of the corner. Did Bez. We saw the crash just as it was unfolding, and it looked like a big one. Fortunately for Bez, he was straight up on his feet. You can already see there down in the factory Aprilia box, the hard work already going on his second bike to get Bez ready to resume this session, arriving here, of course, in arguably the best form of his MotoGP career. Rode phenomenally well to push Marc Marquez all the way to the very last corner at the very last lap before Marc Marquez took that San Marino Grand Prix victory, of course, having handed Bezzecchi in many respects the sprint win the day before. But Bez was putting the pressure on, in fairness to Marc Marquez. You could argue it was a forced error from Marc Marquez rather than an unforced one, but Bez, the incredible confidence that he carries, taking a bit of a dent somewhat on this Friday morning.
Yeah, he was absolutely destroyed after that Misano Grand Prix, wasn't Marco Bezzecchi? Barely had the energy to throw his boots into the crowd off the podium. That's how hard he fought to try and win his home Grand Prix. It was a win he really wanted. He pushed Marc all the way to the checker flag. They were trading record laps, weren't they? Right down to the checker flag were Bez and Marc. So it was probably his best race in MotoGP, but ultimately he was still second best to Marc Marquez, who always has something late on his pocket. That's a tricky braking zone, that one of several here in Motegi. Brembo have a sort of a braking severity scale, don't they? 1 to 6. Well, this is a category 6 as far as they're concerned. The hardest of the year, even tougher at the Burram and at the Red Bull Ring in Austria. That braking zone, which we just saw Bez lose control of the factory, braking from 310 kilometers an hour down to 85 kilometers an hour in less than 240 meters. The front brake temperature gets up to around 700 degrees at that point on the circuit, and so it's one where you have to be very, very precise to judge your braking marker. It's downhill, really tricky entry to that 90-degree corner. Needs to understand why Bez was caught out early.
And it's why Michelin have also gone slightly conservative with the tyre option, certainly in terms of the front tyre for this weekend. They've actually gone a step harder than they were even last year here at Motegi, with the medium front tyre from last year is now, of course, the soft, and the hard from last year is now the medium, with a new reinforced harder front tyre for this weekend to cope with the very specific demands of this Motegi circuit. The rear tyre options, it's not so much a rear tyre limited circuit. This is exactly the same as they were a year ago, so some familiarity in that respect. And given that it is a circuit that really does put a lot of emphasis on the ability to get the bike braked, stopped and turned into the corners, you could, I guess, then be concerned for Pecco Bagnaia's prospects, given how much he struggled this season. But Bagnaia, at least at this stage, is off to a bright start to this Japanese Grand Prix weekend.
It's a real tough tough layout, this Motegi track. Only just over 4.8 kilometres in length, very stop and go. Aside from the fact he's got so many hard braking zones, you're braking for around 32 seconds a lap, around a third of the lap. But this track has the most gear changes on the Grand Prix calendar as well, across the sprint and the Grand Prix, which is a total of 36 racing laps. The riders are going to be changing gear around 1,500 times. Busy old layout is this track in Motegi, built of course by Honda all the way back in 1997. And as Jack just alluded to there, with all these latest tech updates coming out of the Japanese factory, Honda are really starting to find some form, aren't they? Led by the Brit Luca Marini, who comes into HRC's home Grand Prix. Points in the last 3 Grand Prix, points in the last 3 sprints for the first time at Honda. And I was really struck by how much work Honda are doing behind the scenes. And I think immediately after Misano, Aleix Spargaro was flown out to Sepang for a one-day test. A one-day test. They flew him all the way out to Sepang to conduct a one-day test on a very experimental RC2133. I think Aleix described himself a quick and crazy 72-hour trip from Andorra to Malaysia. One day testing it back. Life moves fast, but that's what makes it exciting. Indeed, here Aleix. But you never always felt HRC, sleeping giant in MotoGP, they were never going to take this sort of European battering they've been receiving again for the last 3 or 4 years lying down. But it's encouraging signs, very encouraging signs. And of course, Lewis as well. We know that Fabio Quartararo and co, Jack Miller and Alex Rins also getting a chance to assess the new Yamaha V4 powered M1 at the Misano test as well.
Which received mixed reviews. Like, it's probably fair to say Quartararo wasn't exactly glowing in his praise of it, saying that don't see any progress in the areas that we need so far. I think in fairness to Yamaha, it's still in a rather embryonic phase, that V4 powered Yamaha, which did get its competitive debut at Misano. But Quartararo has already been very clear that the progress, whether it's progress or lack of, in 2026 is going to be central to his long-term prospects in terms of whether he stays in, whether he switches across to something else for next season, as we take another look now at Marco Bentechi's descent into turn 11, which wasn't a successful one.
Yeah, as soon as the wheels came back in line there, it was almost when the rear came back in line with the front, it just chucked too much weight on the front of that Aprilia, and that was it. That was all she wrote. Down Marco goes. Yeah, that was a fast old get-off there, wasn't it, on entry into the 90-degree corner. Thankfully, Marco is just going to slide into the gravel trap on his back. Looks like a bike, thankfully, suffering more damage than rider. It's going to get picked up now by that gravel on the lip. A couple of big barrel rolls through the gravel then for Marco. You sort of see that trying to tuck in his arms just to protect the shoulders. The airbag would have done its job there, as there was 2 or 3 barrel rolls through the gravel. As we pick up Somkiat Chantra. Points in 2 of the last 3 Grand Prix for the Thai rider, including, of course, most recently in Misano, equaling his career best in MotoGP, a hard-fought 15th place for Chantra.
Very early in the weekend, but he'll be pleased with that. 16th and just 0.8 of a second off the pace for Chantra, who were expecting news very soon that he's going to be changing paddocks for next season. Expected to remain as a MotoGP rider for next season, as we follow, or we do our very best to follow, a fast-moving Marco Bentechi making his way into the Aprilia box once again. But yeah, Chantra, he absolutely dominated this Moto2 Grand Prix a couple of years ago around here, when he topped every single session and won from pole position. So perhaps if there is one circuit on the MotoGP calendar where Chantra has a good opportunity to compete against the midfield, this might be it.
He's got 3 banker tracks as Chantra. They're all very, very similar in nature, aren't they? You've got the Red Bull Ring in Austria, where he's always excelled at. You've got right here in Motegi, and you've got, of course, his home Grand Prix in Burren, where he had a couple of podiums over in front of his home crowd. So stop-and-go circuits, hard braking is where Chantra really does come into his own. Yeah, let's see what he can do to round out what looks like is going to be a very short-lived stint in the MotoGP World Championship. Run 1 then completed for Marc as he chases down P1 and number 1 in the World Championship in 2025. An in-depth discussion there with his crew chief Marco and Rigamonte. What a partnership those two have formed almost instantly inside that factory Ducati garage.
some of you might be watching in the early hours of the morning back in Europe. Well, that's not going to put you off your sleep, seeing critters like that. The rider who is nicknamed the Ant, Marc Marquez, probably third in this session, and certainly appear all that pleased when he was speaking to Marco Rigamonti there, and saw Gigi Dall'Igna in the foreground listening intently, certainly from the hand gestures of Marc Marquez. Certainly a Ducati that's not handling how he wants at this very early stage.
See once again the rear right height device in action. Feeling low coming out of that final corner. It's a path well trodden already in Japan, isn't it, as far as Marc Marquez is concerned? As we mentioned, the build-up to this FP1 session, 2014, 2016 and 2018, when part of Repsol he was able to win the World Championship here. I don't think pre-season any of us expected him to raffle the championship with 5 rounds to go. I think they've come from Peru to Japan. Now that is Marc Marquez fandom loyalty. Fair play, well done. That is awesome. That's why MotoGP fans are just so special, aren't they? They come from all corners of the globe to support their heroes. Peru to Japan. I imagine that is not an easy old trip to make. Fair play, well done.
So it's like 15,000 kilometres they've covered to get all the way here. Well, they'll have come from all corners of the world because they know how historic this weekend could prove to be. Here's the young man trying to ensure that Marc Marquez's coronation waits at least another week to Mandalika in Indonesia next weekend. But you've already seen the maths. It's pretty clear what Marc Marquez needs to do. It's a 3-point game over the weekend, which means Marc Marquez cannot win the championship tomorrow in the sprint. It will go to Sunday, whatever happens. But if Marc Marquez wins the sprint, wherever Alex Marquez is, then all Marc would have to do then on the Sunday is finish ahead of Alex. Even if Alex is second in the sprint, he would then gain the 3 points against Marc Marquez, and then would just need to match or better Alex's result on Sunday to win the World Championship.
Well, he really has stood up and been counted over the last month or so, hasn't he, Luca Marini? He clearly has been top rider as far as HRC are concerned. A real burst of form has moved Luca up to 12th in the World Championship. Not a million miles now behind top Honda Johan Zarco overall. 7th at the moment in the standings. There's a couple of places behind his teammate Joan Mir, who had another real difficult time, did he, over in Misano. Joan Mir, the 28-year-old Spaniard, being at it 3 rounds of Misano. The only Grand Prix that Mir has seen the checker flag in this year are Termas, Silverstone, Aragon, Mugello, Red Bull Ring and Catalunya. Not exactly a starting success rate of finishes, isn't it, as far as me is concerned? And I hate to sort of kick him mileage down, but he did DNF in both the sprint and the Grand Prix here last year.
Indeed, we didn't see the crash on screen, the black one crash involving me, but reading between the lines and piecing the various quotes and interviews together, it certainly does appear as if it was me who crashed, and then Zarco crashed trying to avoid the 36 Honda. 2 Hondas down on the first lap of the San Marino Grand Prix. Yeah, already had some problems with his front device not disengaging on the first lap of the San Marino Grand Prix, a first lap which he of course did not complete.
Yeah, that's a big problem when you haven't got the whole shot device disengaged in the first corner in Misano. Well, then there's no braking through turns 2 and 3, so the first time you've got to experience braking on MotoGP bike hard after turn 1 in Misano is into the rear corner, turn 4. And with that shot device still stuck down, unfortunately, me was a bit of a passenger. Of course, I did hear on the Tuesday, we know that there was preparations for a new era in MotoGP in Misano last time out. Of course, we're still very much in the Michelin tyre era in MotoGP. But all 5 factories were represented by their test riders in Misano on Tuesday. The first time Pirelli have had rubber fitted to MotoGP bikes. One of the most interesting aspects, I forgot about this, was I was talking to a couple of guys from Yamaha, and Augusto Fernandez was, of course, getting prep for 2027, was actually running a Wiesdale M1. There was stripped of all of the rider aid gadgets, including sole shot devices and ride-out devices, which will be banned in 2027. So yeah, all the factories already with not just an eye on 2026, but beyond as we head into the new Pirelli tyre era. Well, not the start that maybe the factory Aprilia team were hoping for here in Motegi. take nothing away from Marco Bezzecchi's recent brilliant run of form, which is seeing him now pose a real threat for third overall in the championship. 8 points, he's now behind Pecco Bagnaia with 5 podiums in the last 7 rounds. Let's get the thoughts of the boss. Paolo Bonora joins Jack.
Yeah, he does indeed. And I have to say, far from ideal start. It's back out on track now, Paolo. It's Marco. Did he explain what happened exactly?
Probably he forced a little bit too much, but he was clearly in confidence with the bike since the start. He was already with the helmet rate, so it was minus 0.64. It was a very fast lap. Nothing changed in our plane for sure. Now we change the bike and we will see during the next session. Yesterday already he said that here he feel good since many years because he like this track layout. To be honest, we didn't achieve a lot of points here in the last years, but both of our riders explained yesterday that it is quite dependent to the rider style. So no expectation at all as usual, Jack, but we hope to do a little bit better than the previous year.
How much of that crash is down to coming from Misano, where I imagine he felt almost invincible? He was riding on a perfect level, maybe as confident as he's ever been, and then suddenly he comes here to a circuit with different conditions, different demands, and what he was doing at Misano isn't going to fit here.
Yeah, for sure. After Misano, was an unbelievable weekend for Marco for sure, and also for Jorge, because he said after Misano that he felt that his confidence is raising up. But by the way, we jump into the new weekend, different track layout, different grip level, but with the same mentality. So we start exactly with the same setup as Misano, and to be honest, that we did the same. So we found, particularly on Marco's side, a good setup. We are now finding the good setup also for Jorge as well. But during the weekend, we are trying to keep working as the previous races. So try to improve since Friday to the next session. To be realistic and to be honest with you, since this year we have struggled a bit during the Friday, but we have seen that we are doing the bike, and with this new mentality, we are getting better and better session by session.
You mentioned Jorge just finally coming into the weekend. He said, "My pre-season is over now. There's no more excuses. I'm here to compete." Do you sense that extra motivation, that extra hunger from Jorge for these final 6 rounds, that he's ready to show everybody why he has that #1 plate?
Yeah, fully right, Jack. It was a very nice yesterday to see finally the first full picture of the MotoGP Championship, and was something in particular for him very important to see him in the front of everybody with the #1, so it means something for him and for us as well.
Thanks, Paolo. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, as always, to a pretty boss, Paolo Bonora. He's right about a previous rather poor record around this Motegi circuit. They've never had a podium here previously. Best of 5th a couple of years ago with Late Spargaro. So they could be a front-running force this weekend, which Pecco Bagnaia certainly is. This is very encouraging. I don't want to get too carried away because it's only Friday morning, and when you consider where Pecco Bagnaia has been on Friday mornings of late, particularly thinking back to Hungary and Catalonia, just to see himself anywhere near the top of the leaderboard, which is currently where he sits, will be a bit of a boost for Pecco. 1:44.967. So far, the only rider that's found sub 1:45 level, about 2 tenths clear at the moment. He is of fellow Italian Frankie Morbidelli. Luca Marini looking very strong. I tell you what, Valentino Rossi's over in Japan racing, including this weekend with his it's #2. Bezzecchi's gone down again. Well, things do go from bad to worse as far as Bez is concerned. This has been an absolute nightmare start to his flyaway tour. Down early on at turn 11 and now caught out at the front end washout at turn 5. Two of the hardest braking zones around this Motegi circuit. Well, he's currently in P5. He's gone down at P5. He's about to say there's 4 VR46 category guys in the top 5 at the moment with Luke level 4. Real poor start to the weekend as far as Bez is concerned.
Yeah, fast when he's on that Aprilia, but he's not been on it too much this morning because he's come off it twice. Turn 11, followed now by turn 5, and Motegi might have a bike left for this session, and you better hope that that bike isn't too badly damaged. Let's have a listen there. Down to second gear. Front end cries enough, and Marco Motegi might well have had enough in this morning's session, because that first bike he trashed down at turn 11 didn't look like it was going to be running anytime soon, and they're now going to have to try and ship that Aprilia back to the box and get to work on that one. Otherwise he might be missing the rest of the session, and of course the practice start session to follow.
He just picked up the throttle there and just taken a little bit of weight off the front tyre. What is not up for debate is that Marco Motegi Japanese Grand Prix has got off to a shocking start. Well, you can't really sugarcoat it, can you, at all? It's a disaster as far as Bez is concerned. Let's go down to Jack once again in pit lane.
Yeah, just as you said, Lewis, no bikes in the garage for Marco Motegi. That could well be session over, and I put it to Paolo Bonora just a second ago, and Marco wouldn't admit it, I'm sure, at the end of the weekend, but this has to be overconfidence, just the feeling he had in the front end at Misano. He said, as I put to Paolo, he felt invincible there, and what he was doing at Misano just isn't translating here.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Happy memories, of course, here for Bez in Motegi to his first ever World Championship podium back in 2017, a very wet Moto3 race. But his most recent memories, Motegi, are of finishing the gravel trap at turn 11 and turn 5. Yeah, the Bez fans can barely watch the action, can they? Marc Marquez fans also too. As Pecco Bagnaia, well, you don't need to be a body language expert, do you, to see that I think at the moment Pecco's got a few stability issues with the front end of his Ducati.
Can we go back to what I had on run 1, please? So clearly they're still trying and experimenting with issues. So there's one of Marco Motegi's bikes returning back to the box. Very second-hand, as Jack mentions. We can now see it on screen. It's getting wheeled up onto its stands there, and they'll start the work on it, but they're not going to be getting that one fixed in 15 minutes to get Motegi. We're, of course, not even having a rider back to the box yet, so we need a rider and his other motorcycle to get back before there's any hope of Motegi resuming this free practice 1 session.
Yeah, I mean, Marco Motegi really has been the only rider of late, with Alex Marquez's little slump in form, has been able to offer any resistance to Marc's domination. Second to Marc in, of course, Aston, Renault, and most recently in Misano. I think Marc touched upon this himself. Probably 2 of the hardest Grand Prix he's had so far this year were both in Aston and in Misano, where he went toe-to-toe with Bez, who has
running in this time.
A rather forlorn walk back to the garage, where he's given his mechanics a couple of repair jobs. Yeah, he's going to have to a few apologies. We know that Marco's a top lad. I'm sure he's going to be apologising to his Aprilia crew. Looks a little bit bemused himself, doesn't he, with how it's all sort of gone so spectacularly wrong here this morning, as Marc Marquez has just taken over top spot. He's the second rider into the 44s. So while the factory Aprilia team have had their struggles in FP1 this morning, no dramas whatsoever for the factory Ducati squad. Marc leading Bagnaia, the pair of them in 144.9. It's back just 8 thousandths of a second, splitting the 2 Ducati stars.
Bagnaia has just returned to the racetrack, incidentally. Everyone knows whether he might be going back to something much more similar to the settings he had on run 1, because clearly he wasn't happy with what he had on run 2. Here's Frankie Morbidelli, who's currently 3rd and upwardly mobile in this session as he makes his way down to the tight hairpin curve. Quite literally, it's his name. Down to 65 k's into the right hander before we now begin to wind up the speed, up the gears, and downhill now towards turn 11, where we've already seen Motegi bite the dust. The first of 2 times we've seen him go down in this morning session. Morbidelli is safely through. He now passes under the oval circuit, which is part of what used to be the twin ring Motegi, now in the Mobility Resort. And now left and right into the final sequence of corners. Victory corner, turn 14. And this is going to be a low 45 Morbidelli, not too dissimilar to what he's done already. It's a 45.3. Morbidelli stays in third.
9 top sixes in 14 Grand Prix so far this year for Frankie. We would have liked a few more of those to have tripled the podium spots a little bit more often. I think he was just relieved to have a pretty clean weekend. Helped himself out of trouble, didn't he? Having had a rather stern pre-Mazzano warning from the F1 MotoGP stewards that if you don't start cutting it out on some of these shenanigans which land him in hot water, well, the penalties, the sanctions are going to start getting a little bit more severe. Pouring then through the data, trying to work out why it's gone so wrong for him so far this morning is Marco Bezzecchi. It's a chance for his Aprilia crew. This was the first of his 2 spills this morning. Down the hill, hard braking, decelerating. 310 kilometres an hour for just under 90. A couple of painful barrel rolls through the gravel track there, weren't they, 4 pairs? And then out on the spare bike, just behind Fabio Di Gianantonio. Yeah, Marco's having a good look at the screen to himself. Well, if that's giving him any more of an indication of what went wrong at turn 5. He just had the power back on there. Down he goes, and we have a rather frustrated looking number 72 at the moment, who is not really enjoying his Japanese Grand Prix experience so far, is Marco Bezzecchi.
All there is at the moment is Somkhyam Chandra. He's just got into the top 10 of 45.5. Second of the third of the Hondas now, behind Marini and Mir, who are 5th and 7th. Once again, we see some animated discussions down there. Gigi Dall'Igna just off to the left of the screen. Immediately to Marc Marquez's left is his crew chief, Marco Rigamonti. It's proved quite a successful combination, hasn't it, for Marc Marquez and company in 2025. And although he's now ahead of his teammate Pecco Bagnaia by that slim margin, as Matt mentioned, of 0.08 of a second, still plenty to work on.
Special weekend in store for Ayagura. We just saw him there briefly on the Trackhouse MotoGP machine. First chance for him, of course, a dream come true in many respects, to make it to MotoGP, to get the opportunity to race in front of your home crowd. A track where in Moto2 in recent years, the 24-year-old has given plenty for his home crowd to cheer about. He hasn't finished actually lower than second in his last 3 starts here at Agura-san, including a win back in 2022, runner-up in 23, runner-up also here last year as he moved closer to clinching the Moto2 World Championship. This, though, and he admitted yesterday in the pre-event press conference, a different ball game when you're tackling Motegi on a MotoGP machine.
Up into pit place, although as you did see there on the graphic before it fell away, Chandra has put some new tyres on. He's gone out there on a brand new soft front medium rear combination, which will explain in part why he rocketed up the order. Now he is the top Honda.
Yeah, there's just something in his DNA, in his natural riding style, isn't it, for Chandra? He just loves the real hard braking zones. That's what he mentioned at the start. He was so good in Austria as well. So good in front of his home crowd in Buriram. Yeah, this is impressive. Well done. Off to World Superbikes. It looks like the partner Jake Dixon, the Honda's World Superbike squad next year. It's Klaus Noles, his crew chief, looking on. One of the bad ones he probably picked up. You see, rider back in the day was old Klaus. He'll be happy to see his charging towards the top of the leaderboard. Now from a lot more warning, but as you can see, Marini and Bagnaia, good lap coming in this from Bagnaia. They've clearly rectified some of the stability issues he was moaning about on this most recent run. Just at the moment, yeah, Bagnaia will be seizing back control of this FP1 session. We'll track Marini over right now. That's going to be top 3 from the Honda rider. 5th place after a bit of time in that 4 sector. But what about Bagnaia as he flicks it left then now through 13? Here we go. Final right hand in that turn 14. Elbow kissing the curve there on the inside. 144.7 maybe incoming from Bagnaia. Over the line he comes. 144.8. Oh, which does indeed then see him put his name back at the top of the timesheets.
Marc Marquez watching with us as he sees himself relegated down to 2nd place. Well, we'll see what happens this afternoon in that crucial practice session over 60 minutes before we truly start to talk about a red revival for Pecco Bagnaia. But this is the strongest he's looked on a Friday morning for quite some time. Probably have to go back all the way to Assen, back pre-summer break, when we know he's been historically so strong. This looks a bike that he's much more in control of at the moment, doesn't he? On the way into corners, so often this season he's been picking up the front end, locking, and that confidence to drop it on its side on corner entry. Bagnaia, who hasn't changed tyres, so he hasn't changed his rear tyre. The front slick tyre has done 10 laps, but Bagnaia's 14 so far in this session. This stage of proceedings, much more like it for the two-time MotoGP World Champion.
Yeah, he said yesterday, 2025 feels like it's been a throwaway season. He has offered precious and little resistance at all, has he? Actually, Marc Marquez steamrolling towards this World Championship here, which he most likely is to get wrapped up this weekend here in Japan. Just keeping a close eye on Ciampa's current lap time, because another PB lap, isn't he? The LC Honda rider. So Bagnaia from Marc, Marini, who is just in sparkling form at the moment. He really is making big gains as Honda make big improvements on the RC213V. Marini third, ahead of Morbidelli, Costa fifth. Jack Miller's in sixth place for Prima Pramac Yamaha. Also former MotoGP winner himself around here on the Red Factory Ducati in 2022. Champion's time just gone away through the third sector. Over the line he goes. That was a 1:45.498, which is a couple of tenths slower than his best time in this session.
We've already heard of some of the upgrades that are on some of the Hondas down there in pit lane. Of course, with an experimental machine that Taka Nakagami's on, and it's one of the things that Luca Marini and Joan Mir at the factory squad have been so pleased with this season, is that every time they do put new parts on those factory Hondas, they have the desired effect. So clearly everything is collaborated and corroborated well down in the factory. Of course, so much work goes on here in Japan, in addition to all the work that goes on European shores. So much of the testing also takes place in Europe, but it's all coming together at the moment with Honda, and it's all moving in the right direction. Still an awful long way for them to go to be back to where they want to be. Of course, Marc Marquez's last World Championship especially this weekend did come on a Honda, and they haven't tasted an awful lot of success since.
Costa aside, it's been a distinctly average start to this Japanese Grand Prix for KTM. Acosta once again upholding the Austrian honour. He's fifth at Turkish. We're going to go a long way down the order to find the other KTM. So Binder at the moment is 19th. Vignales is still working his way back to full fitness after his left shoulder injury, and Saxering is 20th. And Bastianini is having a bit of a shocker. He's down in 22nd place at the moment. And Fermin Aldeguer, of course, the rookie coming to Motegi for the first time on a MotoGP machine. That transition has been quite a tough one so far for the 20-year-old Spaniard, because Aldeguer, we haven't said this too often so far, in 2025 is dead last in this session. He's just ticked off his 13th lap of it. But he's yet to find a 45 so far this morning. Is Aldeguer, the only rider actually in the 23 strong field that's as yet not been able to dip under the 146s.
It was never a good track this for Aldeguer in his Moto2 career, never higher than 12th here as a Moto2 rider, although he certainly put any consideration that he doesn't go well on stop-and-go circuits to bed back in Austria when he chased down Marc Marquez and finished in very close second place. As the other Aprilia, the second of those that Marco Bezzecchi has left to the gravel track for this morning session, has also returned, and you can't exactly see a lot of frantic work going on in his other bike. Marco Bezzecchi now looking on with 4 minutes to go. His session is over, and he's perhaps more importantly, I guess, going to miss any opportunity for a practice start at the end of this session.
Good news for Bez is there are 2 bikes now in his side of the factory Aprilia garage. The bad news is neither of them are rideable or usable. Confirmation of the crashes at turn 11 and turn 5, which are going to seriously restrict Bez's time on track this morning. How much so? Well, he's done 7 laps. 7 laps, including 7 completed laps, which included 2 falls. And when you look at how much track time it has cost him, having a look down the order, Ayagura, the rookie, who's been very keen to get some seat time on a MotoGP bike around his home circuit for the first time. And he's done the most laps so far this morning on 18. Most of the riders sort of around the 14-15 lap margin. So Bezzecchi has lost with half of the sort of what you expect allocated track time here, really. As Jorge Martin jumps into third place. He is coming, no doubt about it, isn't he? The reigning world champion. The world champion by how much run? Martin then up into third place. He's out though on the fresh rubber as a little bit of a caveat. With a 45 flat. Encouraging signs. I'm not surprised they're employing this kind of tactic because we know that if there's still one standout weak point for Martin on that RSGP, it's that lack of explosive one-lap pace on a fresh software tyre, which was never an issue for him at all when he was on the Ducati.
He can get himself up the grid. We know how strong Jorge Martin has already proven in race trim on board. But a pretty Jack, let's head down to you.
Yeah, speaking to Jorge yesterday, he said they actually did a lot of work on that particular thing, on trying to maximise his pace on fresh rubber during the Misano test. And they realised together with his team that actually he needs two completely different setups on the bike to be able to get the most out of it. He's got one for his race rhythm, one for the he'll be putting in for the race itself, but then he'll have to completely turn the bike upside down to have a very different setup which they found during the Misano test that they'll implement for the bike in the final closing stages of practice and for Q2 as well. Very different to the Ducati and what he was used to there, where it was very much just swing his leg over it last year, and no matter the conditions, no matter the time of the session, he could go out and put a good lap together for the Aprilia. Far more particular, but they, according to Jorge, have managed to find those two very different setups that should work in both situations.
Thanks, Jack. He could get better here for Martin. He does indeed. He has now climbed up into second place. He becomes the third rider that finds a lap in the 44s.
Bagnaia, Martin, Marc Marquez. So very 2024. That was the 1-2-3 here last year. And of course, Bagnaia trying to chase Martin down to win the World Championship. A chase that proved unsuccessful. And Marc Marquez was trying to keep Enea Bastianini under control in that Japanese Grand Prix last year. So Marini's now fourth from Morbidelli, Acosta. Miller is the top Yamaha at the moment in seventh. Then of Chantra, Bezzecchi still in the top 10 despite his two crashes. And Joan Mir in 10th place. Yellow flags are out again though in the third sector. Someone's gone down into turn 10, and looking on our track map, it looks like a KTM that might have gone down. It is indeed Enea Bastianini.
Yeah, there's been too much of that of late as far as the beast is concerned. Trying to find some confidence. We've got somebody else to have. Morbidelli's gone down then now at turn 5. So there's two
down with Miller.
Was that connected, or they both had their separate incidents? We won't jump to any conclusions. And Miller has got his Yamaha out of the gravel trap. As Morbidelli, completely separate incidents by the looks of it. So
can't see Miller. There he comes, and of course, so soon afterwards there were no yellow flags waving there. So Jack Miller won't be, I would imagine, in any kind of trouble for that because he crashed barely a second later.
Yeah, you know the stewards will be having a look at that. They'll be making sure that the Gian Antonio in Austin, wasn't it, on this year, who actually lost a lap, didn't he, for a yellow flag infringement, then won it back because he had no time whatsoever to react to a yellow flag. That could be the same story there as far as Morbidelli's concerned. Tell you what, he's pretty lucky there, is Frankie, that Miller's Yamaha wasn't on the exact same trajectory as his crash Ducati. So a rather dramatic conclusion to FP1 here in Motegi. In quick succession, Bastianini, Miller and Morbidelli on the floor.
Shades also over Q2 in Brno when we saw Marc Marquez crashing into a yellow flag zone that already had Johan Zarco's Honda in it, but no time at all to react. The yellow flags came out just after Marc Marquez had passed that, and of course there was no time even for the marshals to react to that crash to put the yellows out before Jack Miller also entered the same gravel trap. So don't expect Miller to be in any kind of trouble for that. Session is now coming to a close. Checkered flag now joins the yellow flags that have also been waving. Joan Mir across the line in 11th place, and certainly looking at the lack of red on our timing screens, it is going to be a free practice one for Pecco Bagnaia to smile about.
Leaf gentleman will be thankful that he's unlikely to get a trip to the steward's office, because in Misano post race he paid for the most expensive beer he's never had. After getting busted €2,000 for riding the wrong way down the track on the cool down lap, and he offered a very plausible explanation. He said that on the rider parade on Sunday morning he'd seen a sign from a fan saying, "Give us your gloves for a beer," and Jack's got a 1-2 decline a taste of the amber nectar. Or was he directly ridden past said fan and then was desperate to make sure that he kept up his end of the bargain. He said, well, the fan got the gloves, only problem was I didn't get the beer, and I got slapped with a €2,000 fine. He took it all in good spirits, did Jack?
He is a people pleaser, isn't he, Jack Miller, throughout his MotoGP career, which of course continues into next season. But Pecco Bagnaia will certainly be pleased. He wasn't happy at all points of that free practice one session. Clearly a tweak to his Ducati on his second run didn't bring the desired effects, but either side of that, Bagnaia looked super strong. He looked like the Bagnaia of old, didn't he, this morning? Ooh, so early in the weekend to get too excited, but how excited are Ducati getting with Bagnaia's performances? 1 and 3 for the Ducatis this morning, and Davide Teodosi's for Jet.
Yeah, it is indeed. Davide, is Pecco back?
For sure. I really think so. I think that now we found the way, and I guess that we can be in the position that we deserve.
What have you done then?
Several things, you know, testing the bike for one long day, like we did in Misano. It helped us to find a solution, to test a solution, something that you can do it during the race weekend. And, you know, as our opponents grow up because they have more testing days than us, just one day and give us the opportunity to think about the bike.
Saw Casey in the box for nearly all of the Misano test. How much of a role has he played? Maybe not on getting the bike right, but on getting Pecco right, because we've known he's been lacking confidence of late.
Yeah, anyway, Casey was in Honda, he was in Aprilia, so he liked to deserve, you know, some advertise to the people, and he's very good on that. But anyway, yeah, he talked with. Pecco, but I guess that the way belongs more to Gigi and Pecco.
Well done, Davide. Good to hear he's back.
Thank you.
Well, there you go. Ducati sounding very buoyant, very bullish, and very confident that Bagnaia is back. Well, we'll find out, I guess, over the remainder of the weekend. It is only FP1. Well, Pecco will be sort of saying, let's just keep our feet on the ground, but let's hope there's neutrals for his sake after what's been a thoroughly miserable 2025, completely overshadowed by the brilliance from the opposite side of the factory Ducati garage by a certain number 93, Marc Marquez. Well, he was due to find some form. There has been storms before, though, hasn't there, throughout this season as far as Bagnaia is concerned. Let's hope this is not another one of them. Yeah, a good shot in the arm, that for Bagnaia, a 144.857 on worn tyres as well. Puts him top of FP1 as we get the practice start section underway. Roy Martin second, he was out though late on the fresh Michelin rubber. Marc Marquez third quickest. Maybe the biggest weekend of his 2025. Biggest weekend of Mark's had really since 2019 in many respects. Fabio Di Giannantonio was fourth out of Luca Marini and Frankie Morbidelli.
Marco Bezzecchi will not miss the practice start session, so they've been able to cobble together one Aprilia for Bezzecchi to go back out on track with. So it's not all lost then from this point of view in this morning's session. So I'd imagine that was the second bike he crashed, because that was much more lightning damage than the first one.
If not ripped off a #1 sticker.
Yeah.
That's joking, of course, they can't do that, but Marco Bezzecchi will be running and he can at least take part in this practice start session. He was about halfway around his 8th lap of the morning when he crashed for the second time at turn 5. Bastianini has also made it back to the garage to head out on the second Tech 3 KTM. Thanks for that spot, Jack, down in pit lane. Unfortunately for the Beast, his crash late on at the first gear turn 10 will see him end that session last in 23rd place. A rather miserable morning as far as some KTM are concerned. Binden 19, Vignales 23rd, Bastianini 23rd. Now we're saying thank heavens for Pedro Acosta at the moment.
Well, it is so close here in Motegi already. 1.009 seconds covers the entire field in this morning's free practice one session, as close as it's been all season. As we look at the two factory Yamahas, Quartararo and Rins side by side. Quartararo now makes his way towards turn 1, which does come at you very quickly from leaving grid here. Quartararo is 16th in this morning's free practice one session. He himself, though, only 0.6 off the pace.
Well, Alex Marquez is going to need something more than 15 to the end of FP1 if he is to put the celebrations on hold for his brother Mark. Beats then for Alex with a 1:45.500. That was the exact same lap time that was fired in by Raul Fernandez, who picked him. So Bagnaia engages the whole shot device on the factory Ducati. Wells back a session which is going to galvanise the double world champion, whose form has fallen off a cliff of late. It's been a sorry story in the last 4 or 5 Grand Prix as far as Bagnaia is concerned.
Tends to get out of the practice start session. I wish he hadn't now. That was not a particular kind of sums up Betteki's morning in some respects to that.
Yeah, this is the straight to DVD session. As far as Marco Bettecchi is concerned. Good to see, as you saw on screens there on the picture, Frankie Morbidelli was just about to acquire his second VR46 Ducati away from the grid. So all of our late fallers were able to scurry back to the paddock and get out for this practice start session. Pedro Acosta with a bit of wheelie as he dropped the clutch on the factory KTM. He said he comes into this weekend with no real target, 0 expectations, which seems to be his favourite phrase on Thursdays, doesn't it, for so much of 2025. Acosta, of course, when he was on 2 wheels last year here in Japan, he was lightning quick. Just fluffed his lines at the most important phase of the weekend, crashing out to lead the sprint, crashing out second early on in the Grand Prix. Absolutely announced that step at the start, didn't he? Fabio Quartararo, excellent job on what was a bit of a tough Friday morning as far as Yamaha are concerned in their crunch home Grand Prix. And leading like Jack Miller is
that in between practice starts for Marc Marquez?
Well, there's always drama, isn't it, around when Mark's on the circuit.
That's a new one, even for Marc Marquez, to have a moment like that on his way round for his next practice start. As Pecco Bagnaia goes alongside the rider who, of course, succeeded him as world champion. With he now set to be succeeded by Marc Marquez in 2025. Martin. So, sure that everything is fully engaged and set up. He now leaves the grid. Very light bit of wind. That's about as much as you want on these fire-breathing MotoGP machines as you leave the grid. Waiting for Bettecki to come back round for his second crack.
His girlfriend Gemma Pinto on the scene, getting the shots for social media, I'm sure, after this one session. I saw that Miguel Oliveira final at the Prima Yamaha. Back-to-back top 10, we should mention Oliveira's impressive recent run, which has started the moment he was dumped out of Prima Yamaha, unfortunately. A little too late as Mark gets wheel spin on that factory Ducati away from the line. Monte looking on. It's Mark then. Third quickest at the end of that session. At times we were inside that factory Ducati garage when there was a few animated conversations taking place.
Saw both Junior Marquez and Gemma Pinto there with fingers in their ears. I recall back in Buriram for the pre-season test of the start of the season, watching the practice starts from the pit wall. You cannot hear yourself think as they're all cranking up the revs and getting ready to leave the grid.
Start that away by Fabio Quartararo. The tyre was barely getting any airtime, wasn't it? What's happened to Fabio then between his sort of practice starts? To turn 3 we go.
He should restrain himself there, but he wanted to put a left fist through the screen of his M1 there into turn 3.
been a few times this year where Fabio has just sat stay inside his helmet. Fabio, count the 10, mate. It's just try and pull tensions down a little bit. Well, he's had his knockers, he's had his doubters, hasn't he, over the last few weeks or so, Pecco Bagnaia. But that was much more like the 63 come to know and love over the last 3 or 4 years in MotoGP. And let's hope Davide Tardozzi's words ring through. This is the Grand Prix, and we start to see the Bagnaia bounce back in full swing, because boy does he need it. His podium touches completely deserted in the late. That's Marc Marquez. Even practice start sessions are eventful, aren't they, when the 93 is around? He had to work hard for that 144.959. And all said and done, a solid start from Mark inside that top 3. In the circuit where he's had 11 podiums in 15 visits across all 3 classes, including a 3rd here last year on the Gresini Ducati. Of course, 3rd here the year before in 2023 in real torrential rain conditions. The last of his 140 Honda podiums for Mark. Alex, as we mentioned, is going to have to be going some to improve on 15th, because struggling for pace against this man this weekend, well, it will be game over in terms of the championship. Alex 15th, just about on the 6.5 tenths back of Bagnaia, who led the way.
Looking at his body language there, the way he was crossing his hands as he was talking to his crew chief, potentially front end tucking a little bit for Alex Marquez through this morning's session. Fabio Di Giannantonio ends it in 4th. Of course, Jorge Martini, we're now looking at here on screen, he did put a brand new soft rear tyre in towards the end of the session, so Digia, I guess, of those that didn't change tyres, completing a top 3 for the GP25. So you haven't said that much this year.
Just holding up 2 katsu curries and 1 sushi. Thank you, camera crew, for every race. Here. Our production crew behind the scenes, bringing you all of our unrivaled coverage of the MotoGP World Championship. As Pecco Bagnaia back on top in FP1.
Bagnaia, is he back? Well, we'll reserve judgment until later in the weekend, but that was a good step. Bagnaia, last year's double winner, fastest from Jorge Martini, who was second to him last year, and Marc Marquez, who was third to them last year. Fabio Di Giannantonio, 4th from Marini, Morbidelli and Acosta. Miller top Yamaha, 8th from Sompiak Chantra. Best we've seen from him in a session this year, 9th ahead of Miguel Oliveira on the 2nd of the Pramac Yams. Bezzecchi with 2 crashes, 11th ahead of Tranmere, Johan Zarco and Ralph Fernandez, who was the first to go down this morning. Alex Marquez, as we saw, 15th from Quattararo, Nakagami, Ogura, Binder and Aldeguer. Maverick Vinales, 21st ahead of Alex Rins. And one of our last riders to fall this morning, Enea Bastianini, 23rd, a second off the pace.
So Pecco Bagnaia then, with the whole session on the medium rear tyre. Not bad, 144.857, then put him top of the timing screens. Preferred the hard front tyre throughout the session. Hard front tyre surely will be the pick for the weekend, given all the hard braking zones here in Japan.
Jorge Martin following a similar strategy for his first couple of runs before he bolted on a brand new set of tyres, medium front, soft rear, for his last run to take second.
Marc Marquez will initially start the session on the soft front, quickly then moved over to the hard front. A lot of work done on that medium rear tyre. Mark, lap 13, saw him deliver his 144.
Fabio Di Giannantonio also went soft front, medium rear to kick off the session before he moved across to the harder front tyre. Also put on a second new medium rear in this morning's session for Di Giannantonio to take 4th place.
What about the sector times? Well, Marc Marquez is that leads the way, tight in that first sector. For 7,000th per second coming Bagnaia and Bezzecchi behind him.
Bezzecchi quickest in the second sector, so something to smile about for Bez this morning.
Likewise in sector 3, when he was on 2 wheels, he was rapid, wasn't he? Bez ahead of Bagnaia and Martin.
And Marc Marquez quickest in sector 4, so despite not topping any of the 4 sectors around this circuit, Bagnaia fastest over the whole lap.
So on a weekend where all the headlines could be going the way of his teammate Marc Marquez, he chases a 7th MotoGP World Championship. The Friday morning headlines have been grabbed by an unlikely source, with Pecco Bagnaia putting behind him all his recent woes to lead the way here in FP1 in Japan. Here's Bagnaia back.
On Earth. The world's most fearless riders, the fastest bikes, the most forward-thinking manufacturers. This is the hunt, and we ride to the edge of possibility. Our riders and machines are always first on the throttle, last on the brakes. The riders, athletes with hunter mentality, the peak of physical fitness, talent and skill, and always calculating their next move. Manufacturers, creators of the most advanced bikes on the planet, capable of speeds above 360 kilometers per hour. Purpose-built for MotoGP, pioneering engineering, creating blistering acceleration, ultimate precision and absolute performance. Unrideable to mere mortals, tamed only our riders. We ride to the edge of your seat with more overtakes, more travel, and more adrenaline. The rear wheel drives, the faster, fastest wheels, the final corner moves, the range, rocky underdogs, the legends and the upstarts. The times when you can't look, and those when you can't look away. With pioneers and visionaries working tirelessly not just for the win, but for the future of our sport, our technology, and our planet. Their eyes not only on the checkered flag, but on the ever-moving finish line of progress. We ride together as one global racing family, with the riders, the teams, the engineers, the technicians, the broadcasters, the truck drivers, the cooks, the hospitality staff, the sponsors, the many individuals all united in the goal of glory, with every kind of the every weekenders, the first timers, the forever fans, the never miss a flaggers, the home track faithfuls, the destination circuit holidayers, the day trippers, the Sunday sofa viewers, the ones we've known forever and the ones we haven't met yet, cheering from the stands or at the screen. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, we are one. Be part of it, and safety. It's time for the 2025 MotoGP World Championship.
It's his first big Saturday slip-up of the season. The Ducati's a gold and running a sprint is over. It's second completely a sensational Saturday. Welcome one and all to Grand Prix of San Marino. All eyes on pole position.
It is now get set for action here at Misano.
Sounds how we're racing here at MotoGP in Misano. Great start from pole position. And Marco Bezzecchi. Better made the perfect start. That's Mark close right from the rear tyre at Bezzecchi. To Costa getting on the inside of the Gianantonio. Up now into 6th. Margot, I thought he was going to try and line up a move on Bezzecchi. Costa now up into 5th.
Costa's preferred passing point is coming up into question.
Quartararo tries desperately to tough it out in the braking zone. Costa now up into 4th.
Pedro Costa, he's going to think about a podium. Oh, he said, right, that's broken down.
Bit of an embarrassing weekend with the factory KTM team.
Do you know, James Radfinder's problem on Friday has been repeated.
Absolute shocker for KTM.
As that's Pecco Bagnaia on the floor. The home Grand Prix to forget for Pecco.
A 2025 to forget for Bagnaia. Bezzecchi, he's under big pressure though right now, isn't he, from Mark? Marquez has made a mistake. Marquez make that move on Bez to take the lead here. In Misano. More misery for Bagnaia. Bezzecchi, absolutely phenomenal. A 1:31.357 on Bez, fastest lap of the Grand Prix. Oh, just cannot shake him off.
Marquez responds with one of his own.
It has been another Misano masterclass from Mark. He takes the checker flag, just over half a second clear of Bezzecchi. It's a very lonely and distant 3rd place for Alex.
On back to loading. You get a match point and the Japanese Grand Prix that's over.
That is revenge. That is payback for his exes. Was in cruise control. Got sprint on here in Barcelona. Here's Marc Marquez, 2025 MotoGP Constructor Champions once again. Congratulations. Marc Marquez comes into our main race day in round 15 with a 185-point lead. We will go to Misano next weekend with a first match points. So Mark cannot lose 3 points or more to Alex in this upcoming 24-lap Grand Prix. Bologna. It's now a race to the MotoGP here in Montana. The front row, it's Alex Marquez that leads the field down into the first corner. Mark trying to get aggressive on his inside of the braking zone for turn 1. Goes around the outside of Mark, almost going through two. They lean each other, don't they, the brothers, but it's Mark that have the early advantage.
Bagnaia started this Grand Prix in the right vein of form. He's already up to 12th place. He's gained 9 places on that one. Oh, 3-2 runners, and that's Di Gianantonio at the back of the picture. The bike coming back onto the racetrack. He's crashed behind Marco Bezzecchi.
Nice move that, a really tiny move by the beat on the inside of Quattraro. He goes side by side here with Mark, who's going to be the latest on the brakes into that first corner. Fair play to Alex, he really has toughed it out there, hasn't he, with Mark. Alex has made his move early on here. He leads at the start of lap 4.
It's Ducati, KTM in our top 4.
And now Mark out with some slipstream, make an instant revenge attack on Alex. He goes side by side, Alex. So good.
These KTMs are flying. How long will Pedro Acosta sit behind Marc Marquez?
Alex has opened up a gap of what, a half dozen bike lengths back to Mark in second place. In fact, Mark's coming with a bit of pressure here. Acosta once again just letting him know he's right there, showing him his front wheel down the hill into five. Alex, Mark, Acosta, Bastianini.
KTM versus KTM, and Bastianini's just going to park it on the inside of the 37. Can the 23 get it stopped just ahead of Pedro Acosta? Bastianini does, and he's now staring potentially at the first KTM podium. Could he improve on that yet?
That gap for the first time in an awful long time is down to the 0.3 of a second. We're coming to the phase of this Grand Prix where we know Mark is the master. It's Alex versus Mark.
Really skipping the rear tyre is Alex. Finally starting to break the resistance of the big brother here.
It has been a brilliant back in Barcelona for Alex Marquez, who takes the victory here. And the Catalan with left three. He is by 1.20 seconds ahead of the Mark. Marc Marquez can now no longer clinch that second MotoGP World title in Misano next weekend. It's brilliant first KTM Grand Prix podium. I thought I may have Bastianini. This is going to be such a special moment for the Marquez brothers. On a podium together in Barcelona. It does not get any better than this.